This is not a revenge story, at least not the kind you're expecting. There's no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, no scene where someone drags a suitcase down the hallway while tears fall onto the floor. This story is more dangerous than that, because it is quiet. And when something quiet decides to leave, the damage it leaves behind is often much greater. My name doesn't matter here. What matters is that for 3 years, I was known as the easy one. The girlfriend who didn't cause problems. The woman who understood everything. The partner who never made things complicated. He said it like it was a compliment. "You're so low maintenance," he'd say, smiling like he'd won something. "You just get it." And I did get it. I understood that when he interrupted me mid-sentence, it wasn't an accident. It was because he genuinely believed his version of my thought was better than mine. I understood that when he made plans without asking me, it wasn't cruelty, it was certainty. He had already decided my answer wouldn't matter. I understood that when he spoke for me at dinners, finishing my opinions before I could say them, it wasn't care, it was conviction. Conviction that I wouldn't have anything different to say. People think silence means emptiness. They look at a calm surface and assume there's nothing underneath. He assumed that too. We met at a bookstore. Simple, ordinary, almost poetic. Two strangers reaching for the same book, laughing at the coincidence, exchanging numbers. The first 6 months were gentle, comfortable. He talked about work, tech consulting, projects, difficult clients, small victories. And I listened. I always listened well. "You're such a good listener," he said once, lying in bed, his fingers tracing absent patterns on my shoulder. "Most people just wait for their turn to talk. You actually hear me." And I did hear him. Every word, every assumption hidden inside those words. Every time he said "we," when what he really meant was, "I decided." The change didn't happen all at once. It came slowly. So slowly that no one watching from the outside would have noticed the exact moment things shifted. It started with small statements, delivered as facts. I told them we'll be there Saturday. I ordered for both of us. I know what you like. I already replied to your mother. I said we couldn't make it. Each time I paused, just for a second, long enough to notice, short enough that he never noticed I had noticed. "You're quiet today," he observed one night, eyes still on his laptop. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking," I replied. "About what?" "Nothing important." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his screen. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. He didn't actually want to know what I was thinking. He only wanted confirmation that I wasn't thinking anything that could disrupt his comfortable reality. So I gave him what he wanted: confirmation and silence. But silence that is chosen is not the same as silence born from emptiness. One is absence, the other is strategy. That's when I began to catalogue things, not as someone hurt, but as someone waking up. I noticed he always chose the restaurant. I noticed he remembered visiting his family, but forgot mine. I noticed my career was cute, while his was important. I noticed my exhaustion was just stress, but his required immediate accommodation from everyone. When I mentioned feeling overlooked, he smiled gently and said, "You're too sensitive," as if sensitivity were a flaw and not awareness, until something small happened and everything finally clicked. We were supposed to meet my friends for dinner. I had been looking forward to it all week. An hour before we were supposed to leave, he came home and said, "I'm exhausted. Let's cancel. They'll understand." Not a question, a decision. Then, scrolling through his phone, he added, "I already told them you weren't feeling well." I stared at him. "You told them I wasn't feeling well." He didn't even look up. "Yeah, easier than explaining that I'm tired. You don't mind, right?" That question that isn't really a question, because it's already done. And all that's left is your agreement to keep things smooth. For 3 seconds, I considered saying something, explaining how tight my chest felt, how disrespectful it was to lie about me to my own friends. Instead, I said, "No, I don't mind." His shoulders relaxed. "See, this is why we work," he said. "You don't sweat the small stuff." He kissed my forehead and walked away. I stood there in the kitchen, completely still, and felt something settle into place. Not anger, not even hurt. Clarity. Cold, clean, unmistakable clarity. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as an extension of himself, a convenient extension, agreeable, quiet, low maintenance. And the worst part? He wasn't doing it on purpose. He genuinely believed this was what a good relationship looked like. Smooth, easy, uncomplicated. What he didn't understand was that easy was me doing all the emotional labor. Smooth was me swallowing every objection. Uncomplicated was me erasing myself to make room for him. That night, lying beside him while he slept peacefully, I made a decision. I wasn't going to explain this to him. I wasn't going to ask him to see me differently. I wasn't going to give him the chance to apologize, promise change, be considerate for 3 weeks, and slowly return to the same patterns. I was going to do something much simpler and much more devastating. I was going to let him keep believing he understood me, right up until the moment he realized he never did. The next morning, everything looked the same, and that was intentional. We woke up at the same time, shared breakfast, exchanged the same polite questions about our days. To anyone watching from the outside, everything would have seemed normal. But internally, something fundamental had shifted. I stopped correcting him. When he finished my sentences, I let them end wrong. When he assumed my thoughts, I didn't clarify. When he made decisions without asking, I didn't resist. Not because I had given up, but because I had moved on to a different phase. There is a moment when you truly wake up, where explaining yourself feels unnecessary, almost childish. I noticed how relaxed he became once I stopped pushing back, even in the smallest ways. How confident, how comfortable. He mistook my withdrawal for trust. "You've been so easy lately," he said one evening, smiling as if he had solved a puzzle. "It's nice," I smiled back. But this time, the smile wasn't automatic. It was deliberate, because ease, when it isn't mutual, is a warning sign. I began observing him the way someone studies a system, not emotionally, strategically. I paid attention to what he assumed I didn't notice, the conversations he lowered his voice for, the messages he answered too quickly, then locked his phone, the casual mentions of plans that didn't include me, spoken as if they were irrelevant details. None of it shocked me. Shock requires surprise. This was confirmation. And confirmation doesn't demand reaction, it demands recalibration. I stopped sharing my thoughts entirely, not out of spite, out of precision. I noticed how quickly he filled the silence I left behind, how much he talked when I didn't, how often he revealed his thinking without realizing it. Silence is uncomfortable for people who rely on control. They speak to regain it. I let him. He grew bolder, more certain, more careless. "You're not the kind of person who would leave," he said casually one afternoon, not looking at me. "You value stability too much." I registered that, not emotionally, but mentally, because people project their own limits onto others. What he didn't realize was that my silence wasn't about stability, it was about clarity. I began preparing quietly, not packing bags, not planning confrontations, preparing internally. I imagined my life without explaining myself, without defending my boundaries, without needing to be understood by someone who had already decided not to listen. And for the first time, that idea didn't scare me. It felt clean. There is a strange peace that comes when you stop hoping someone will finally see you correctly and accept that they won't. Hope dissolves, expectations dissolve, and what remains is freedom. I think he sensed something, not consciously, just a subtle shift. "You're quiet again," he remarked one night. "Everything okay?" I looked at him. Really looked, and for a moment I considered telling him everything, every thought, every conclusion, every way he had misread me. But then I realized something important. Understanding me wouldn't change him, and explaining myself wouldn't restore balance. So I did the one thing he didn't expect. I nodded and said, "Everything's fine." And for the first time, it was true. The moment he completely underestimated me didn't arrive with drama. It arrived with confidence. The kind of confidence that only exists when someone believes the ground beneath them is solid, unquestionable, immovable. He was standing near the window, scrolling through his phone, speaking without really looking at me. By then, I recognized that posture. It was the posture of someone who assumes agreement before hearing an answer. "I made a decision today," he said. "It just made sense." I stayed quiet. Encouraged by the lack of interruption, he continued, "I didn't think it was necessary to involve you in the details. It would have just complicated things." Still, I said nothing. He glanced up briefly, checking my face the way someone checks the weather. Not carefully, just enough to confirm it wasn't raining. "You're okay with that, right?" he asked, already nodding. I waited a moment, not because I was unsure, but because I was watching something unfold. People often reveal their deepest beliefs when they think the outcome is guaranteed. He exhaled lightly and smiled to himself. "I knew you would be," he said. "You're not the type to make things difficult." There it was, not an insult, a conclusion. In his mind, I had already been categorized, and everything I tolerated came bundled with that label. I realized then that he wasn't dismissing me out of cruelty. He genuinely believed he understood me. And that was the most dangerous part, because when someone thinks they fully understand you, they stop watching you. And when they stop watching, they start making mistakes with confidence. I could have stopped him right there, corrected him, explained myself, redefined my boundaries out loud, but something in me shifted instead. Not pain, not fear, detachment. Because once someone stops seeing you as unpredictable, they stop seeing you as an equal. And equality, once lost, is not restored through conversation. I let him keep talking. "You don't need to worry," he added. "I've got it handled." I nodded. In that nod, he saw confirmation. What he didn't see was the exact moment I stopped waiting to be included. He assumed my silence meant acceptance, that my calm meant consent, that my lack of reaction meant ignorance. He believed I hadn't noticed the pattern, hadn't felt the shift, hadn't understood the implications. He thought I was still the same woman who stayed agreeable out of habit. He was wrong. That night I didn't cry. I didn't write. I didn't rehearse speeches in my head. I simply sat with clarity. Clarity doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives clean. I replayed moments in my mind, not emotionally, but analytically. The interruptions, the decisions made without me, the way my silence had been interpreted, not as depth, but as absence. And then I understood something that changed everything. He wasn't going to change, because he didn't believe there was a problem. And as long as he believed I didn't notice, he would keep acting exactly the same. That realization brought an unexpected calm, because once you see the entire structure clearly, you stop reacting to individual moments. I didn't need him to understand me anymore. I needed him to keep underestimating me. That was when I made a decision of my own. Quietly, internally, without announcement, I would stop correcting him, stop clarifying, stop trying to be accurately perceived. I would let him keep believing the story he had written about me. Because the moment someone feels completely safe in their assumptions is the moment they reveal everything. And I was done being the explanation. I was ready to be the consequence. After that night, nothing changed on the outside. And that was intentional. We still woke up at the same time, still shared meals, still exchanged the same polite questions about our days. From a distance, everything looked normal. But internally, something fundamental had shifted. I stopped adjusting myself to his rhythm, not dramatically, quietly. I began responding to messages when it suited me, not when he expected it. I stopped filling silences that weren't mine to soften. I stopped smoothing over decisions he made alone. And the more I pulled back emotionally, the more relaxed he became. Confidence grows from repetition, and he was convinced nothing had changed. "You've been so calm lately," he said one morning. "I like this version of you." I smiled, because that version wasn't for him. I started reorganizing my life in areas he had never paid attention to. Documents, accounts, routines, not as someone running away, as someone repositioning herself. I stopped sharing future plans, stopped asking for his opinion. He didn't notice. People who underestimate others don't see change until it inconveniences them. "You'd tell me if something was wrong," he said one day. "That's how you are." I didn't correct him. Correcting would have required belief, and I no longer believed. That's when I realized something permanent. I no longer needed to be chosen by him. And once that need disappears, the relationship is already over. The exit didn't begin with a conversation. It began with posture. I stopped centering my days around him, stopped adjusting my schedule, stopped anticipating his needs. I started existing in the foreground, quietly. He mistook that for distraction. "She's just busy lately," he said on the phone to someone once. "She doesn't really stress about things." That sentence settled everything, because stress is not the opposite of love. Indifference is, and I was no longer invested in being understood. I began making small, silent, irreversible decisions, reorganizing parts of my life he assumed would always remain unchanged simply because they always had. Strangely, he remained comfortable. "Things are good between us," he said, satisfied. "We work well together." We worked because I was leaving without noise. There's a point in every quiet transformation when you realize it's already irreversible. I wasn't trying to save anything anymore. I was closing it, and when someone stops explaining, they're already halfway gone. The change in the atmosphere came slowly. Questions that had never existed before began to surface. "You're sleeping out again tonight? Everything really okay? You've been distant." I answered with partial truths. "I'm sorting some things out. I need space this week. We'll talk later." He grew irritated. Control doesn't disappear suddenly. It leaks. When he suggested we buy a house together, as if it were simply the logical next step, something tightened in the air. "We're basically married already," he said. "There's no reason to wait." I felt the boundary. "Not now," I replied. "I need time." His jaw tightened. Time for what? To think. Way for the first time he couldn't fit me into a familiar response. "This isn't like you," he said. "Maybe you never really noticed who I was," I answered. He didn't push further, but his confidence cracked, and that made him nervous. That Thursday, I woke up before the alarm, not afraid, certain. I dressed quietly, separated what had been mine for a long time, left the keys on the table, and the envelope. Inside wasn't anger, it was truth. 3 pages of everything I never needed to say out loud. When the door closed behind me, it didn't slam, but to me, it sounded like freedom. Hours later, my phone began to vibrate. Messages, calls, confusion. I watched it all with a calm that surprised me. When I finally answered, his voice was panicked. "Where are you?" "I left." "What do you mean you left?" "Read the letter." Silence. "We can talk. Fix this." No. Talking was never the problem. When he called me cold, I understood. He only noticed things when he lost control. "You never really saw me," I said. "And now you don't need to." When I hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. The weeks that followed were quiet, and for the first time, quiet meant peace. He tried explaining, apologizing, promising, but he still spoke about himself. He never asked what I needed, never asked who I was, and that confirmed everything. Months later, I sat in a cafe watching life move forward, without adjusting, without shrinking. I had returned to my natural size. I discovered I was complex, opinionated, restless, everything he never had the patience to see. Months later, I heard about him through other people. Nothing direct, nothing dramatic, just fragments, dropped casually into conversations. He's been acting strange. He says he doesn't trust anyone anymore. He keeps saying he was caught off guard. It caught off guard. That phrase stayed with me, because only people who never truly paid attention are ever surprised. I heard he tried to reconstruct the story in different ways. Versions where he was the victim, Others where everything had simply been a misunderstanding. But there was one constant in all of them. I was never a whole person in his retelling. I was a role, a function, an absence he couldn't explain, and that explained everything. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes, I found a photo of us, both smiling, him confident, me contained. I looked at it for a few seconds and felt nothing. No anger, no nostalgia, no sadness. Indifference is not cruelty, it is freedom. I tore the photo in half and threw it away, not as a symbolic act, but because it no longer represented anything. Life didn't become perfect, it became honest. I started saying no without explanations, disagreeing without fear of being too much, taking up space without apologizing for it. I learned that being seen requires courage, but being invisible costs far more. I learned that silence is only virtuous when it is chosen, and that when someone gets used to your lack of reaction, they are never prepared for your absence. He never saw me leaving, because to him I had always been standing still. He didn't wait long to fill the space, not because he missed me, but because he panicked. People who confuse control with love cannot tolerate emptiness. They need to replace quickly, before the silence starts asking questions. I heard about the new woman through others. She's everywhere with him. He posts her constantly. They look happy. They always look happy. The relationship appeared fast, loud, and public, as if it needed to prove something. She laughed loudly in photos, marked her territory in comments, occupied the space aggressively, and he looked proud, as if saying, "See, I'm fine, but people who are truly fine don't need to announce it." It didn't take long for the cracks to appear. She's too intense. She asks too many questions. She doesn't understand how I am. How I am. The phrase he used whenever responsibility felt inconvenient. Then came the comparisons. You were different. You didn't mind these things. You understood. I understood because I erased myself. And that's when something shifted. For the first time, he didn't miss me. He missed the power he had with me. With someone who speaks, you must listen, negotiate, adapt. And that exhausted him. Control does not survive reciprocity. The message arrived late one night, short, careful, unemotional. You were the only person who really knew me. I read it twice and smiled. Not out of pride, but irony. He never wanted to be known. He wanted to be comfortable. I replied with a single sentence. I knew you before you had to explain yourself. Nothing more. I didn't argue, didn't continue, didn't block him immediately. Some replies end entire chapters. While he tried to recreate old versions of his life, I was building something new. Not another relationship yet, but a new posture. I took up space without shrinking, spoke without rehearsing, disagreed without apologizing. I realized I was never difficult. I was whole. And people accustomed to edited versions of others struggle with that. When I eventually began seeing someone new, everything felt different from the start. He asked questions, waited for real answers, listened without interrupting. He didn't rush to define me. And that told me everything. The real consequence was never me leaving. It was him realizing, too late, that he didn't lose a quiet woman. He lost a deep one. He mistook silence for compliance, calm for weakness, patience for permanence. He continued trying to recreate the past, but the past cannot be rebuilt when the flaw was structural. I moved forward without needing to prove anything, and that is something no form of control can survive. Some people don't suffer because they were left. They suffer because they lost their position of comfort. He didn't miss me at first. He missed the ease. But ease doesn't love. Ease accommodates. And when the person who carried everything leaves, the emptiness becomes impossible to ignore. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Stories We Tell. Leave a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep creating stories about strength, self-respect, and new beginnings, because stories that restore dignity deserve to be told and remembered. Thank you for being here.